lot of NFL news been dropping all over the place this week, and no better person to talk to about it than Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News, joining us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Vinnie, how you doing through this first few weeks of the NFL early preseason?
Well, doing well. A lot of things happening around with injuries and position battles and the typical stuff you see in training camp, and a lot of teams' fates changing here in the 2018 season.
Absolutely. I want to start with the news that just came out about an hour ago. So it was reported Ben Roethlisberger, he may be going under concussion protocol. He was doing a drill from the pocket, fell, hit his head, had to be helped off the field with the trainers. You know, you look at the quarterback situation, Pittsburgh, it's actually kind of bizarre because you have three guys who were all drafted by the Steelers organization, Landry Jones, Josh Dobbs, and Mason Rudolph. And if Roethlisberger, for whatever reason, misses time, I don't expect them to keep all three of those quarterbacks. So, you know, how do you see the Steelers quarterback position out there?
Yeah, I think we're not 100% sure if any of these guys may have the potential to be successors. So that's the number one thing. And we don't really know right now, but that would definitely accelerate the plan and trying to figure out who quickly, because we know that beyond this concussion and this current situation, he's talked about retirement, hinted at it. You never know what's going to be his last year. This could be it. So they got to weigh all those options here soon. I don't think they've done necessarily a good job to be as aggressive they need to be in trying to find a next wave plan. They've used some fourth-round picks on guys, but I think it'll be interesting to see if Roethlisberger has to sit out here in a couple preseason games. It really opens up this battle. I think he was going to play in the second one anyway, but it'll make it more interesting that these guys can go full battle and the Steelers can really know what they have in these three quarterbacks.
When you look at the Steelers organization, you know, historically they were known for their defenses. Recently it's been much more offensive in how they've played. So, you know, did the defense do enough this offseason to upgrade, or do you think it's going to be still a heavy dependency on the offense in 2018?
I look at the defense, it's got to be shell-shocked from the way the Jaguars put up points, and the Jaguars' offense that they faced actually has improved. You look at the Chargers, a team that's rising. They have a pretty potent offense. You look at the Patriots, we know Tom Brady gives them a good baseline. So when you're looking in the context of the other AFC contenders, that loss of Ryan Shazier and trying to replace him, which is almost impossible given how much he gave them both as a leader and playmaker, that there's a big void on that part of the defense. You see Jaguars don't have many holes. The Chargers have Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram up front, setting the tone for their entire defense. The Patriots have a lot of key pieces back, including Dante Hightower, to clean things up. Well, the Steelers have some void. There are questions about the secondary, question about how they're going to handle the middle field. I think they'll be okay getting to the quarterback, but they've done that okay, but they can't handle the short to intermediate passes that have killed them against the Patriots and Jaguars. It's going to be a long season for them in terms of we'll win the division again, but what else? Maybe not else.
Vinny, one thing I'm fascinated with is with the Jets and these rookie quarterbacks and rookie quarterbacks around the league, but particularly with the Jets because I'm very high on Sam Darnold. I said when he was drafted, the guy probably should start week one. I thought he was going to start week one. He got some nice praise from Redskins corner Josh Norman. He was praising him left and right. What is your opinion of Sam Darnold? Do you really think he has a shot to start week one? Do you think he's going to win? Do you think Todd Bowles is going to wait till later in the season? I mean, what do you see right now from Sam Darnold, especially after a pretty nice preseason debut?
I think it's pretty clear what the Jets are doing here. With Teddy Bridgewater, they're playing him quite often because it's long been rumored they want to flip him. They want to use that modest contract they paid to take a flyer on him, show that he's somewhat healthy, playing well, and then be able to trade him for some value and help in another position. Well, then it clears it where it's just McCown and Darnold, a lot more easier situation to manage. And then McCown, we know that he's been good in stretches, was very good for the Jets at times last year, has a good connection with Jeremy Bates. I think it comes down to how much they trust Darnold with the turnovers. When he gets that pressure test there in that third preseason game, is he going to revert to some of the things that kind of messed up his final year at USC, turning over the ball in bad situations. Because the Jets, when you look at it, the defense is not bad, offensive line's not bad. They do have some skilled weapons. So Darnold could be successful there, but then the Jets could also look at it, hey, we might be able to win some games early. Do we want to just throw this rookie in the fire and see what happens?
Do you foresee this Jets quarterback situation being similar to the Eagles back in 2016? You know, they had a guy in Sam Bradford. They had a veteran backup in Chase Daniel. And, of course, they had their high draft pick, their rookie Carson Wentz. I mean, you just mentioned that Teddy Bridgewater could possibly be flipped, and that might be what the Jets want to do, especially if he's playing well. Do you see them flipping Bridgewater and then saying, okay, McCown's the veteran, but we're going to go all in with our future of the franchise and Sam Darnold, start him and have McCown just be the backup?
Yeah, I think that could definitely be a strong possibility, especially if you see Darnold's first-team reps in practice and chances in the remaining preseason games, namely getting in their second after McCown. I think that is a bigger indication than if he actually gets in their first ahead of McCown. That means that they're comfortable with Bridgewater, that they're showcasing enough that somebody's talking to make that deal. But remember, with that situation with the Eagles, they needed some misfortune in the form of actually Teddy Bridgewater going down to make that trade. So I think the Jets will be watching carefully to pounce if a starter or someone that we look as a starter, say like a Ryan Tannehill, some team wants to make an upgrade there and make that trade.
Another rookie quarterback I wanted to focus on. I know Baker Mayfield gets a lot of the headlines as well. But if you look at a guy like Josh Rosen out in Arizona, people seem to not really be talking about him. I know he struggled a bit in the preseason opener with the Cardinals. He's actually behind a guy we just mentioned in Sam Bradford. I mean, what do you think the plan is with Josh Rosen this season? I know he was lauded a couple of years ago when he was a freshman at UCLA that he was going to be a superstar, but compared to what Darnold and Mayfield are doing right now, and obviously Josh Allen might have his own problems in Buffalo, where does Josh Rosen stand in the hierarchy of these rookie quarterbacks, and does he really have a shot at playing this year, aside from Bradford possibly getting hurt this year?
Well, it's funny because Josh Rosen, when you look at the numbers, and the second team was just not very good, and this is one thing that's going to really show up a little bit in Arizona. They got Larry Fitzgerald, they've got David Johnson, but a lot of other question marks. They lost their center for the season. Their offensive line is, I'd say, average at best, and trying to figure out the rest of the receivers after Larry Fitzgerald. So a lot of things to worry about around the quarterback. And then you look at Bradford, he's getting 15 of his $20 million guaranteed. That's an inexplicable move to me, but when you invest that much money in a guy, you figure that he's going to be desperate to start there unless you can flip him somewhere in a trade, and that's going to be hard to do coming off a knee injury. So right now, I think Bradford is the guy there, that the money is going to make that obligatory, and maybe Rosen being a little behind. What you see in Rosen so far, he's a gunslinger, but that also means he's going to have some growing pains. So I think he could use about half season to develop. The Cardinals are not going to be contending here. So as soon as they're out of contention, and Bradford's probably taking his lumps, and maybe he's hurt around the same time they're not in contention, I think you'll see Rosen in there by November and get his chance to see what he can do.
Another big name that's flying around the league, and he has not been signed yet, it's Dez Bryant. He's visiting the Browns on Thursday. I even threw out a couple other teams that could possibly use him. The San Francisco 49ers, I would think, would be a nice landing spot with him and Jimmy Garoppolo, and giving the 49ers actually a number one wide receiver, or maybe in this case a good number two. Do you foresee Dez signing within the next week? You think it's going to be before the regular season, or you think we're going to be waiting a while before Dez actually does sign somewhere?
Well, I think it might take an injury for him to sign, because if these teams really need him, I think they would want him in camp, getting adjusted to a new offense. I think the problem with Dez is he wants to play for a contender, but he can't see that he could actually make a team a contender that already has some skill there. And I think with Cleveland, the holdup has to be, when you look around, that's the wild card of Josh Gordon. If he's fine and he's just staying away, then you look at all of a sudden Josh Gordon, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins played pretty well. You have Antonio Callaway looking pretty good. You figure what kind of role is Dez Bryant going to have, especially when you figure David Njoku and Duke Johnson are a big part of that passing game. And then when you look in San Francisco, they've started to build a good pecking order there. They really like Dante Pettis and what he can do. Richie James, another rookie, is doing well. So once teams get a look at what they have and they say, okay, we don't need to invest in a veteran that may change the dynamic of our locker room, no wonder it's taking him this long to get a job. You got to get in early, and he probably is really upset that he didn't take that Ravens opportunity when he had it.
Speaking of wide receivers, you just looking at what's been going on in Cleveland, we know with Jarvis Landry trying to fire the room up of the wide receivers, Corey Coleman being traded, the fact that the Browns are in the spotlight on Hard Knocks. Do you think that may incentivize Dez to want to sign with the Browns because he knows he might get some TV time?
Yeah, Dez seems to be all over the place in what he's thinking, but maybe that's an asset. I think the biggest thing is going to be how the coach and the offensive coordinator appeal to him and say what his role is going to be and if he's going to buy into that role. Because like I said, in Cleveland, if Josh Gordon's okay, Jarvis Landry, you might see Dez Bryant only when they spread the field a little bit just so they can put Landry in the slot, and he's going to be the clear number 3 receiver in that situation. So is he going to be okay with that fact that he goes from a number 1 to a number 3 because the diminishing skills were there last year. So I think he's got to accept his limitations, go out there and try to help a team and do their thing. And maybe, who knows, I mean, the Patriots with their mess, with Eric Decker not working out and Kenny Britt not looking good, there's always a chance he could end up there and get a shot with that team.
Another guy who's currently not in camp, but for other reasons, is Khalil Mack. Obviously, the situation with the Raiders has become pretty tenuous. There's rumors floating around out there that the Raiders could consider trading him, and the Packers would be a trade partner because of the fact that the GM of the Raiders used to work, Reggie McKenzie used to work in the Packers organization. To me, it really seems like for the Raiders, this is a money crunch issue. This is an organization that doesn't have a lot of money on hand, and when you're guaranteeing money, you got to put that money in escrow. So is there any way the Raiders can come to some sort of agreement with Mack, or are they just so cash-strapped that both sides never going to come to an agreement?
Well, they have to think about him being very important. I think a big factor in this that's been underrated is Derek Carr and his deal. And he got his deal first, and they both came in the draft together. When you look at the trajectory, Derek Carr had one good year. He's had injuries, hasn't been healthy. Some say he regressed last year, while Khalil Mack was the Defensive Player of the Year and put a team with not much talent on the shoulders. And I think the fact that they're saying things like our defense was bad anyway with Mack is really kind of a pretty sad because it's on them because they didn't get the players around him to support what he does really well. So if Mack is being wasted there and they're not going to pay him, well, let's hope they move him quickly. And Green Bay would be fantastic to see what he can do in a Mike Pettin defense. They'd move him around, do so many things well, and could totally flip the fortunes of the Packers defense going forward.
Another guy who's currently attempting negotiations, Aaron Donald in the Rams. The Rams GM says they're in the same zip code. So does being in the same zip code mean they actually get something done?
I think they will at some point. It's just a matter of what, and I think the holdup is making sure he's the highest paid defensive player in the game. And Khalil Mack can probably pay attention to this as well. But Donald clearly right now, with J.J. Watt coming back from a major injury, and he was setting the standard with his contract, I think there's a good case for Donald to say, I need to be the highest paid defensive player. And if you're the highest paid defensive player now, that means you're the highest paid defensive player in NFL history. So he can make that case, especially pointing to the Rams, saying, hey, you're spending money way ahead of time with Todd Gurley. You spent a lot of money on Brandon Cooks. I think you could lock me up. And the Rams have at least shown that they're willing to spend the money, while the Raiders have been very limited in how they spend their money.
Vinny, do you see a situation where Aaron Donald could hold out into the regular season, or do you foresee a deal getting done before week 1? I know that quote was just thrown out there that they're in the same zip code, so that I would assume that means negotiations are getting better, but I think that just the fact that Brandon Cooks was paid, Todd Gurley was paid, and your franchise defensive player is still on a very cheap deal. I mean, do you think that Aaron Donald could take this holdout well into the regular season?
I think there's a chance he could definitely do that because he deserves the money, and Gurley they kind of jumped the gun on when they didn't have to. So you question where the team is going and if it's going to put itself in a bind going forward with Jared Goff and those deals that are going to be around the corner with this team. But in terms of cornerstone and how much he means to your team, Aaron Donald is the guy there, and you have to lock him up.
Here with Sporting News is Vinnie Iyer. You can follow him on Twitter at Vinnie Iyer. Vinny, I wanted to get an outsider's perspective on Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia Eagles. There's been a lot of talk whether he's going to be ready or not for week 1. Nick Foles could be the guy for 1 week or up to 5 weeks. We just don't know. Wentz threw out today that the hope is he's ready for week 1, but it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to be very close. People are kind of taking this quote as they never heard it before, yet that's been the situation the entire time. Do you think Wentz is ready for week 1, or do you think the Eagles would be wise to actually sit him for a week or two and let Foles play out the beginning of the season?
You have to imagine, just coming off a torn ACL in December, we have had some miraculous returns. Adrian Peterson comes to mind, but you have to figure that he's not going to be 100% if he comes back in week 1. Yeah, he might be medically cleared to go. That's the decision the Eagles have to make, because Nick Foles right now is not completely healthy. He's battling a neck injury as well, but he's definitely a lot healthier than Wentz. That's a tough decision for the Eagles, because you come out of the gate, are you going to get the Foles, streaky Foles that was good and ended the Super Bowl MVP, or are you going to get the one that kind of crashed when he gets overexposed? So you don't know right now. So it's a big decision, because I don't think you can just assume you can plug in Foles and he's going to be the Superman he was last year. So I think they're going to play very carefully. If there's any doubt, if he's not 100%, he's your future, he's your franchise. Nick Foles is only signed through this year. You got to protect Carson Wentz and put in Nick Foles.
I think that's something, you brought up a good point, how Nick Foles is probably not going to be Superman like he was last season. I think that's something that people fail to see, that, some people want to say if Wentz can sit out for 2 games, he can sit out for 3 or 4 games, and the Eagles will be fine. They might go 3-1 or 4-0, but it's really no guarantee. I know the schedule at the beginning of the year for the Eagles isn't as daunting as other teams' schedules, but when you look at what Nick Foles has done, he had a great 2013 in 10 starts during the regular season. He had a great playoff run last year, but other than that, he has not really shown so much where you can be totally confident in him to win 4 games automatically. Would you mentioned that the Eagles would be probably wiser to sit Carson Wentz for a game or two just to make sure he's completely healthy. Do you think the Eagles are in the right state of mind, whether they are trying to control Wentz? Because Wentz has said he wants to get out there, and he's very eager to get out there. Do you think the Eagles could possibly have a problem on their hands trying to control Wentz and trying to keep him level-headed and not giving into his demands that he does want to get out there for week 1?
Well, I think this was a bit of a concern last year. I think it was a bit overblown. Some people said, they were more comfortable with Nick Foles because Carson Wentz was taking more chances. I wouldn't go that far, and Carson Wentz did some amazing things for them when things didn't look good for their offense. He made a lot of plays and nothing was there. But I think they want to cut that down, because putting himself in the path of danger, not necessarily added or led directly to his injury last year, but I think they want him to play a little bit more contained if possible, instead of the reckless abandon that we saw at some points last season. But I think he has to be a little bit smarter coming off this injury if he's going to play in there, and I think that's going to be the question. Yeah, and if he's not 100%, if he's more like 90, are they going to get assurance that he can alter his game a little bit until he's fully ready? Because we saw that from Russell Wilson a couple of years ago when he was completely banged up. Adjusted his game a little bit to hang in there, play well, even when he was not 100%, and that's what they need an assurance from Wentz to make this happen.
I'm glad you brought that up, Vinny, because I wanted to ask, and I was asking this question to the guys earlier, and that is, you look at the NFL. Wentz has been injured twice since he was drafted. He had the broken ribs last preseason. Aaron Rodgers been injured multiple times. Andrew Luck coming off the major shoulder injury and other injuries before that. Is there something to be said about guys who are not per se scrambling quarterbacks, but have the athleticism and the mobility that maybe they have to be protected from themselves because sometimes they try to do a little too much?
I think that's definitely been the case. And Ben Roethlisberger, you can file him under that, or Cam Newton to some degree, that he takes a lot of hits because of moving around and keeping plays alive. I think Wilson is especially adept at, given how many sacks and the pressure that he faces, to not take those big hits. But I think he's just a gifted visionary runner in that sense. So these other guys are going to take those hits, and they haven't had the best offensive lines, so that also factors into it. But getting rid of the ball quickly, I think you'll see that more from Andrew Luck, protecting him, maybe a few adjustments for Deshaun Watson coming off his injury as well. So it's just you want to make sure that you don't take away that element of their game, but also be smart in situations where you don't have to put the guy at risk.
One more for you, Vinnie. I always appreciate your time here on 97.3 ESPN. Vinnie Iyer joining us at the Sporting News. As all guests, he appears on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Vinnie, the situation down in Jacksonville with Fowler and Ramsey both being suspended. The Fowler thing I get because it was his fight is basically chasing down Ngakoue, but Ramsey is a totally different situation because he literally goes after a guy on Twitter, on the media, doesn't apologize for it, still unapologetic mostly about it, and he gets suspended. Is there possibly more to the Ramsey situation in Jacksonville that was the last straw and there's other things that we don't know about him behind the scenes? Because typically guys can get suspended just for tweeting.
Yeah, with Jalen Ramsey, I think maybe it's also sending a message to say, hey, we know you've stepped over the line, you've gone after opposing players because you didn't like what they said to you when you were covering them and all that. So I think they're trying to keep a young player, very talented player, very confident player, and he backs it up. So he keeps in check so he doesn't lose his head, cost his team bigger things down the line, and actually start to show that he's more of a leader on this team versus just a young guy that's a little cocky. So I think with him, it's just a matter of maybe the team wants to say, hey, dial it down a little bit. We like your feistiness, but you're going over the line and you're not going to help us in the end.
Follow Vinnie Iyer on Twitter at Vinnie Iyer. That's Iyer, I-Y-E-R. We always appreciate him joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Vinnie, I hope you continue to enjoy at least some of the action in the preseason because the regular season is only a few weeks away.
All right, thanks a lot, Josh.